right, it is 11:30 on May 16th, 2024. We're still waiting for a few other members of the committee to join, but I will run through our introductory slides and then get asked to get the meeting started. Today we just have a couple concepts to review, so there won't be any votes taken. So I may skim over some of the stuff about how that process works. But as I said, this is the May 16th meeting of the Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee. Ms. Marinucci as our chair to go through the virtual meeting regulations and procedures. The meeting shall be conducted according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by roll call vote. Recusals due to a conflict of interest should be stated for the record prior to the start of any presentation. The recused committee member will then leave the meeting for the duration of the case discussion. The chair will call the meeting to order and ask for a roll call of the committee. The administrator will introduce the first project. The meeting will then be turned over to the applicants to proceed through their presentation. Each presentation should be completed prior to questions and comments from the committee. Once the presentation is concluded, the administrator will provide any background information when applicable and read any comments received from the public. The committee will then begin deliberations of project review. Please use the raised hand feature if you'd like to speak. After deliberations and review concludes, the committee will render its recommendation. The applicant may leave the meeting after the project review is completed. Then all projects will follow the same format until all projects are heard by the committee. Once all projects have been heard, the chair will call for any committee/administrator reports. Then after all reports have been heard, the chair will adjourn the meeting. Regarding community comments, any and all community members may provide their written comments, thoughts, or questions regarding projects presented to the committee. Community members may also telephone their comments or questions to the committee administrator. All comments, thoughts, or questions must be submitted to the committee administrator no later than 48 hours prior to the start of the meeting. And submissions can be made by emailing our general email address, or calling our general phone line, or mailing or stopping into our office here at City Hall. Public comment received after the deadline will not be heard by the committee. Public comment will be collected by Landmark staff and sent to the committee members for review prior to the scheduled meeting. Landmark staff will then summarize any received comments during the meeting. The applicant of the project is under no obligation to answer any community questions. Community members are invited to attend the Design Review Advisory Committee meetings, but there will be no open public comment period. As far as design review guidelines go, all projects are being reviewed using the Secretary of the Interior standards for rehabilitation and are being considered for the issuance of a certificate of appropriateness. As I said today, since it's just concept, we won't be taking any votes or making any motions. But we are, still applying the Secretary of the Interior standards and helping the applicants get to a point that they can make their final application. And all projects are considered on a case-by-case basis, and the Historic Ohio City Design Review Advisory Committee makes recommendations to the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. Recommendations are not final actions. Depending on the scope of the project, submissions may be approved administratively or will need to be reviewed by the Cleveland Landmarks Commission. Projects will be scheduled at the next available commission meeting after an action is taken. We'll just have the Secretary of the Interior standards up there. So with that, Ms. Marinucci, if you're ready, you can call the meeting to order and I can go through real quick.
Okay. Okay, calling to order today's Thursday, May 16th. This is the Historic Ohio City Design Review Committee. The meeting is in session. Can you call the roll, Dan?
Sure. Ms. Anderson?
Yes.
Ms. Clary?
Here.
Ms. Land? Ms. Marinucci?
Here.
Mr. Miller? Mr. Persons?
Here.
Mr. Talley?
Here.
And Mr. Trevisano?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum. Our first project for concept review is case HOC 24-15 at 2621 Lorraine Avenue in the Lorraine Avenue Historic District. Wesley, is it the AHA Market House or AHA Market House?
Aha, I believe.
Aha, all right. We have
Dan?
Wes Harper here. Yes,
I need to recuse.
okay. All right, yeah, if you just want to turn off your camera and
Yep.
go mute. So Phil, you're on. Mr. Talley will be taking over as our chairman for this case. Yeah, we have Wes Harper here to go through his presentation. So with that, Wes, if you want to let me know when you want me to change slides, I should have your presentation up on the screen now.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Thank you for having me today. We're going to be looking at 2621 Lorraine Avenue, which is an existing two-story structure with a partial area of loft space on the third floor. The first floor is a retail space that's currently a tarot card business, and then an apartment in the rear, and then a couple apartments up on the second floor. As you can see from these images, the structure is kind of a false front profile that extends past the gable roof profile that defines the rear, or basically the entire length of the existing structure. We are looking to essentially rehab this structure in its entirety, from the exterior cladding and then the full interior gut as well. To this point, we have been trying to get state historic tax credits. We are currently going through the SHPO process, and they've been, they have a standard that has made it a little bit challenging to make this project work for us. But we presented yesterday a smaller footprint for the addition in the rear that we're proposing. And so, Dan, we do have kind of a different current design for this. I don't know if it's possible to review that right now. I did send it to Jessica a few minutes ago. If not, we can go through what we have and you can kind of get a sense of the spirit of the project. But things have moved quickly with SHPO in some ways, slowly in others. And the scheme that we have here today is a little bit antiquated. So is that a possibility?
Not really easily. We've already, I guess this is the version that's been sent around to the committee. Is there a way you could kind of describe the changes?
Yeah, for
easily?
sure. And honestly, the site plan hasn't changed at all, so we can describe what's going on. And we could also look at the renderings that we have here. But the profile of the structure has gotten smaller in the rear addition. So I guess if we want to switch to the next page, I could just go through the presentation as it is. That would be fine.
Okay.
So thank you. Currently, the existing structure takes up about 60% of the north to south dimension of the parcel. We have a larger setback on the east side where you have a walkway that skirts the east side of the building. And then along the western portion of the building, there's about a little bit under 1 foot setback from the eave that overhangs the wall. And then it steps back a bit relative to the setback as you head further south. Through the process with SHPO, we originally showed the, let's say, southernmost rectangle attachment on the site plan here that shows an existing two-story portion. We originally had that being demolished because it did seem to be an addition that didn't kind of exist in the time period that we're looking at for the renovation, but SHPO has been insistent on keeping that. And so in some ways, that acts as a hyphen between the existing structure and the new structure that will eventually go in the vacant space that you see to the right. Again, the existing structure, 2.5 stories. It's roughly 4,127 square feet. Next. Here are the existing floor plans. You can see that we have, again, on the first floor, a retail space, and then an apartment in the rear. On the second floor, we have a couple apartments there. And then on the third floor, it is a loft for that northernmost second floor apartment. And so essentially, all of the interior partitions would be demolished. We are looking to completely overhaul this interior. We will be keeping a portion of the tin ceiling that's in the retail space on the first floor. Currently going through a negotiation with SHPO on how much and how our new floor plans are impacting that tin ceiling. Next. So here we have the existing elevations of the project. At the top left, you see the north elevation, the profile of the false front, and then the gable behind it. We have obviously an extensive storefront here that would be renovated to essentially match the existing design. The south elevation, you can kind of get a profile of that 2-story portion in the rear that has more of a low pitch roof. And then the rest of the structure has probably 9-12 pitch. The east elevation, again, you can see that smaller portion, smaller 2-story portion in the rear. And then the west elevation essentially faces a parking lot for Hansa House to the west. Next. Here are just some window details that we've provided to SHPO. We're really kind of in the beginning stages of the design process. We're just trying to get them to be on board with the idea of having an addition to this existing structure. So in terms of detail and how this addition is really going to be detailed and look from a material perspective is still a bit in flux. Next. So here we have the proposed site plan. So you can see that to the south, we have a new 3-story addition, and that has 5 apartment units. It does go all the way to the property line in the south. The developer that is developing this project is also the owner of the property that it's backing up to the south. And so we do have a proposal and design for that structure. However, that's not in the landmark district. So we would be going through the normal planning commission process for that. In this scheme, you can see that we're proposing to add new dormers on the existing structure. In the most recent plan, our SHPO is not allowing us to do new dormers. And then the addition would only be 2 stories with a gable roof, as opposed to the flat roof scheme that you'll see here. So the idea is that SHPO wants to have the existing building that faces Lorraine to be the most prominent structure on the site. And so that's caused some issues with really the financial viability of the project, but we think we're getting to a good spot. Next. In terms of floor plan, the plans really don't change much in terms of site relationship. The top here, we have the first floor plan, of course. We have the retail space fronting Lorraine Avenue. That would, in the end, still be the same tenant that it is right now. They do a good business there, they said, and so we wouldn't be putting them out permanently. They'd likely have to move out during construction, but it would be a tenant that remains. In the existing structure, a little bit to the south of the retail, you can see we have a central stair that heads up and serves 3 residential units on the second floor. And then on that first floor allows entry into a first floor apartment. As you head to the south in the floor plan, you can see the footprint in the more dark hatch of walls. That is new construction. And so there's a singular stair that leads up to, I guess, in the plan we have in front of us, 3 levels of apartments. The apartments that are accessed off of this stairway include the small 2-story low pitch roof existing addition that's in the rear right now. So it's kind of an overlap of new and old, which we think could be an interesting dynamic as we get into the interior design. Up on the 3rd floor in this scheme, we show lofted spaces for units 202 and 203. In the updated plans, there would simply be a lofted area above unit 201, which is closer to Lorraine Avenue. And then the 3rd floor plan for the addition would no longer exist, essentially. Next. So here we have the proposed elevations. The north elevation at the top left shows essentially a rehabilitated storefront, replacement of siding and trim to match existing. In the front, between the 3 windows, there's kind of a scallop profile to the siding. We would be recreating that scallop profile and essentially matching what's there now. The condition of the existing siding is in really bad shape. There is termite damage to the siding and possibly framing. So once we start to get into demolition, we'll have a much better idea as to how much of the structure would need to be replaced. But essentially, in our opinion, all of the siding needs to be replaced. The south elevation, the profile would be different in the new scheme, but here we show a block firewall, essentially, which would be painted to match the siding of the rest of the building. The east elevation shows the existing structure, of course. We have the proposed dormers, which we are not proposing now. And then, of course, the 3-story addition in the back. SHPO has deemed this 3-story portion to be too large in scale. And so essentially what we've done is lop off the 3rd floor and simply place a gable structure on top of that. The fenestration on the 1st and 2nd floors would remain the same. And you can see that we have kind of a not quite randomized window placement in the existing structure, but it's certainly completely dependent on the interior spaces as opposed to what it would look like on the exterior. So we utilize that same concept in placing the windows so that the 2 structures kind of speak to each other, but the detailing potentially would be a little more contemporary for this addition. On the western elevation, you can see we do have windows facing that facade or that property line to our west, and siding to match essentially everything else. Next. So here we have some very conceptual views of the potential project. At the top left, we have the orthogonal view looking at the front of Lorraine, or the Lorraine facade. As I mentioned, we'd be looking to essentially rehab that storefront to its existing condition. I haven't been able to source any historical photos of this building. There are a handful of the buildings to the east, and it looks like they were incredibly similar to what we have here in terms of design. So, if that's something that this committee would recommend to use to kind of act as a basis for what this renovation would be, we'd be happy to hear that. But the existing layout seems similar to what it would have been historically. The color palette is based on some selections from the Ohio City recommendations for paint colors. We think the blue is contrasting some of the things around it. to give it its own unique character. At the top right, you can see how that addition previously looked as a 3-story structure. And in many ways, at least the hope would be that the vacant parcel to the east, which is at the corner of 26th and Lorraine, would eventually be built or developed with a minimum, probably 3-story or 5-story structure that's set back. So in some ways, what we're seeing here, a handful of the views potentially wouldn't even be visible long term. At the bottom left, we have an elevated view looking towards the southwest, giving you a better idea of the massing of the addition and dormers relative to the existing structure. And then at the bottom right, kind of the opposite view looking towards the southeast. Next. Here we have more pedestrian level views. This is essentially across the street looking to the south for both of these views. As I mentioned, the gable roof in the back now. In the upper photo here, you can see a large portion of that 3-story structure. So you can imagine if that was a gable roof, the profile would be much less imposing. So with that, James Asimis, the developer, is also on the call here. He doesn't have anything else to add. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Wes. Looking forward to feedback on this. So yeah, I'd like to open it up to the committee for comment. Chris.
Thanks, Phil. So overall, I think this is a really sensible addition. I've just got a few pointed comments relating to the addition, kind of referencing Secretary of Interior standards just to draw a distinction between the new and the old. Specific to what you mentioned as the hyphenated connection between the two. Just wondering if there's a way to use that as a way to discreetly or softly differentiate the two masses, knowing that the rear mass is going to be a little bit softer in its own kind of form as the way SHPO is requiring it. As right now, kind of the same palette, the same materials, it feels as if it's being expressed as a singular building. So I just think drawing a distinction in that called hyphenated form might reinforce the new from the old in a way that harkens back to the Secretary of Interior standards. And then I was wondering if you could reiterate a little bit the block wall, the firewall at the rear of the property, if what cladding that's envisioned as having?
We're not proposing any cladding on it right now because the intent would be to build the structure that we do on the 26th parcel would essentially back up to it. They would.
I see. Okay.
Essentially.
It's basically a temporary facade, more or less.
Exactly. And
yeah,
we have that project submitted for a zoning review. So it is going through the process, certainly behind this project, but we are starting to introduce that project to the city.
Okay.
And in terms of the hyphen, I think it's a pretty nice idea to maybe think about that smaller 2-story portion that you see in image 2 in between kind of the larger existing structure and the proposed. When you say differentiate the hyphen, I'm kind of envisioning it as maybe the cladding for that 2-story portion becomes maybe more of a trim color.
Right.
And then the addition possibly maintains the color that's the same as the existing. But you're really kind of showing that they're two structures.
Right. I don't think it needs to be loud or anything. I just think just some kind of means of drawing a distinction. Yeah.
Okay.
That's all I had. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think my thoughts are similar to Chris's with the distinction, and it seems almost what Chabot's asked you to do creates less of that distinction. So when you're looking at the cladding of the addition, are you also looking at the same scalloped material or profile of the cladding?
The profile of the cladding would be just the straight lapped siding. It wouldn't be the scalloped. We wanted to maintain that same profile as kind of the secondary facades as we see it.
And then the hyphen in between, you're showing the terrace above it now. What will that become?
It would likely just become a low pitch roof, which would probably drain to the west. So there would be probably a small coping, or excuse me, small parapet on the east and west facades, and then a coping. And probably a gutter and downspout on that west side. Yeah, so this space that you're seeing in image 2 would be free of that visual clutter.
Great.
Thanks.
Is the blue that's on this is that matching the existing building, or it's a different shade?
It's the same color. Yeah.
Okay, got it. And then the units on the first floor, those are all at grade.
Essentially, yes. They would probably be, you have to meet the ADA accessibility standards. So they would be at grade, but, probably a handful of inches above in reality.
Okay.
We'd have to ramp up probably.
Gotcha. I like everything that's shown here. Agree with the previous committee members. Just had a couple questions. I think it looks good. I look forward to seeing the update with the third floor cut off.
Great. Yeah, and really what we wanted to kind of come with you today with was, showing you that there is an addition is proposed, and it sounds like you guys are pretty comfortable with that concept. So while the design would obviously be different than what we have here, the cladding, the simplicity of the window layout, that would remain the same.
Angelo?
Thanks. Yeah, my comments were when I was originally looking at this first iteration that you sent in, I didn't ever have a reaction that addition 3 stories felt too large. So I don't know if I know we're just at conceptual, and maybe this is going to come back for another conceptual. I don't know what's next. I don't know if there's any other appetite or consensus, but I don't know if it'd be helpful for the developer or you in this process, but I would almost be willing to make a motion or some sort of statement saying that 3 floors feels okay for at least for me. I don't know if for the rest of the committee. It sounds like maybe it's mixed. I thought the comment about dropping it down to 2 floors negates some of that effort to differentiate. So I just want to state that. And then also additionally, that back portion that you said might have been a porch that you had hoped to rebuild, that hyphen, quote unquote. In all the years I've lived here, I've never been able to see it. So I've never even known that's there. I would also be fine demoing that and turning that into more functional space. But again, I don't know if I represent a majority of who's here today, but I just want to state that. So to the chair, kind of let you kind of strategize on if we need to do anything now, or maybe it's just better to wait.
Anyone else have comments?
I'd like to maybe mention, as I mentioned, we did originally proposed demolishing that smaller two-story, we're calling the hyphen. And we had a design that, you know, it kind of created the hyphen in a different manner. SHPO has been very adamant about keeping it and obviously taking off the third floor. James, I mean, what do you think? I don't think it would hurt to show that, at least from what I'm hearing, potentially the committee here is open to that three-story portion and the hyphen being modified in some way.
That would be great to have that support. I know it would help help it as push our case for its appropriateness to the SHPO. So I would appreciate that.
Yeah, I would also say, yeah, I would support the three-story rear addition. I do think that that liminal space between should be structured. It should be less in scale. It should be different, kind of as my first comments mentioned. But I know that SHPO is quite firm, often in their positions. So.
Yeah, just to jump in here, since this is concept, we won't be making any motions or taking any official votes. It's just feedback, but you know, you can certainly pass on, you know, if the committee in general does feel that the scale of what you're presenting today is appropriate and they don't necessarily agree with SHPO, you're welcome to share that with the state and let them know. I could talk to them as well, but we won't be doing any votes or motions today.
Understood.
We have any ability to
think-
kind of do like an informal roll call, like just to kind of take a temperature on the group?
Can I ask a quick question? Would the addition, and I'm fine with the 3 stories with this project as well, but do you think it would look more favorably if there was more contrast with the new addition? You know, if you weren't trying to mimic some of the, you know, appearance of the original structure as much?
Yeah, I feel like that would naturally be our first approach to this. SHPO has seemed to prefer a very, I don't know, that they clearly want the addition to be subservient to the existing structure. And, you know, I think if we had the ability to be a little more expressive in what we're doing here, I think from the beginning, James and I have envisioned that. And we've been kind of put into a box here for all intents and purposes. So we're taking it as it comes with them. And we do have a meeting this afternoon at 2:00 with the committee. So, you know, it's been a delicate dance with them to this point. And James, I don't know if you have any better explanation on that, but I feel like we're kind of taking their lead on this and we're still getting browbeaten along the way. So it's been a tough process.
So yeah, I know I'm not sure that, you know, we would have a lot of pull in this situation. Yeah, which is why I'm not sure. I think most of us are in agreement as well as far as the 3-story thing. So I'm not sure if taking a roll call would be helpful. We support it, the vibe I'm getting. So if that can be communicated, that's totally fine. At least is on my end. But do we have any additional comments? Anything you guys want to say, Wes?
No, I appreciate your time. And, you know, we will mention some of the comments that we've gotten here. If it helps, great. If not, it feels like we have a supportive committee behind us here, either way we go. So Dan, I don't know if you'd be open to sending them some sort of correspondence that mentions this, but I wouldn't expect that to happen before 2 o'clock today, but maybe just for the record eventually. So with that, I'd say we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Thank you, Wesley. Just
Okay.
real quick before you leave, are you working with Mary Angelo or?
Yes, and
Okay.
then I think
Vanessa.
yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I can try and communicate the committee's feelings to them. But yeah, if you guys feel like you have kind of enough feedback at this point, we'll move on to our next agenda item.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rob.
And our next one is case HOC 24-16. It's on West 32nd Street. 32nd Street shed building renovation and I guess repurposing. So this is kind of part of a larger project that I guess committee members who've been on longer will have seen a lot of over the years between this and across the street and everything else. But looks like we have Dollar Group, we have Brad Newsom here. So Brad, if you want to start through your
Sure.
presentation, I will just let me know if you want me to change slides.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Hi, guys. My name is Brad Nosen. I'm with Property Advisors. We are a partner of the Dollar Groups on the historic renovation next to this project of the old YWCA, and working on the north side as well. I may have Dan Spirico from Dollar jump in a little bit here. We came into this project later, obviously. Dollar's been spearheading the historic portion. My understanding of this property here, what we're calling the red shed for the time being, is that it's not been included as part of the previous discussions on the historic renovation. It was never intended to be a part of the receiving historic state and federal tax credits. The point, and it's kind of standing as its own standalone project. My understanding as well is that it's not well suited. It's never been a residence, and it's not well suited in its layout for a residence currently. And so our goal here is to eventually take this to BZA and get a change of use. It is currently a zone for single family or two family. Historically, it was a small gymnasium for the YWCA, and then everybody else who kind of used the space thereafter. So we're hoping, obviously we're going through the channels here, and ultimately we'd like to repurpose this into some sort of local retail building. We can flip to the next slide, and we're here obviously for conceptual. We're just starting this process. You guys are probably familiar with the site. This is just south of the historic YWCA building there. It's located on 32nd. Next slide, please. Here's where the building sits in context to 32nd and Franklin, and the historic renovation is sitting behind the mansion, just south of the mansion. It's about a 2,000 square foot building. Next slide, please. Same thing. You can see the zoning here. I'm sure you're familiar with. Next slide. These are the current conditions of the property. It's in rough shape, obviously, as that entire thing is, but luckily we're under construction on the rest of this project. Our goal of turning this into local retail would be to have a sort of all-day cafe, not a late night sort of use, but we think it'd be a benefit not only to the residents of the two projects we're working on, but also to the residents in that area, especially with the park there. We envision that it could be a great place for somebody to go grab a coffee or a sandwich and walk around the park or walk around the neighborhood. And it would be a nice little infill for the neighborhood there, provide a little extra retail to a portion that doesn't have much. Next slide, please. Interior conditions. Again, we're not going for any tax credits, but this is how it is right now. It's just a big empty shed. Not much to look at, honestly. Next slide, please. And then I probably will turn it over to our architect, Michael Neal, on this one. But, you know, I think originally we were envisioning an entrance on the front of the space. But I could have Mike, maybe if you're able to step in as to why you kind of created the front patio here and a side entrance and this little pocket sitting area.
Sure, sounds good. Pardon the construction noise in the background here. So when I first started looking at this, you know, there wasn't a super obvious, you know, request or solution as far as where the front door would be. But with the elevated patio, it just felt like squeezing a ramp or squeezing in a staircase there was a little much with the proximity to the sidewalk. And we already have a nice sloping driveway there. So it felt like pulling the main entrance off the street and then turning that driveway into a place to kind of informally sit and gather with some stepped plantings or benches felt like a good option. And then that really allows, you know, the ability to pull the facade all the way to the sidewalk and turn that into a porch. And then just to kind of, you know, be sensitive to the neighborhood, to privacy and sound, and to sort of psychologically kind of contain the noise and the activity, we extended the roof out over this new porch. And it just creates a nice indoor-outdoor space. If it's, you know, you can picture a summer day, it's raining on and off, people could still be enjoying the outside. And it also kind of just quietly lets you meander into the building off the street, and it doesn't have to have a big sign or a big entrance.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Nick, too. Having the entrance on the side creates the foot traffic more immediately on the overall on our total project, as opposed to having people enter off the street. So you're kind of already entering into the larger development, if that makes sense. So it'll divert foot traffic a little bit that way. Next slide, please. And you can kind of see where the entrance is here more easily on the left-hand side, the north side.
Yeah, so we're taking advantage of an existing door here, and then we would be opening up a larger garage-style door for the entrance to the patio. Again, these are all just ideas. You know, we looked at a few other kind of cool cafes and stuff like this. I think it could be a nice modern touch, a nice way to, you know, add onto the historic facade of the building to kind of play off that red, maybe touch that up if that's desired or feasible. And yeah, I mean, we have a nice open interior to play with some cool old industrial features. It would make an amazing cafe or retail space. And I think this would be a welcome addition to the neighborhood if it, you know, is providing an amenity that's a little bit, you know, off of one of the main commercial strips. These sorts of uses are, you know, usually pretty welcome in residential neighborhoods as long as they operate within, you know, noise and activity schedules that work with the neighborhood.
Yep. Next slide, please. Just some interior renderings. You can see kind of those beams that we showed you earlier on, still in place coming across the interior of the space. Next slide. Again, just more interior renderings. You know, obviously we're not complying with SHPO. We're not pursuing store tax credits, so it's really more about a change of use. Next slide, please. Yep, more interiors. Next slide. And that's all we've got. We're happy to answer any questions you guys may have.
Hey, so,
Go ahead.
Phil, I think I'm back in action if that's okay.
Yep.
Hi, Nia.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. I'll open up to the committee members. Philip, got your hand raised. Do you want to start?
Oh, I guess so. I just thought it was a really beautifully designed building. I really appreciate all. I hope it gets built. I really appreciate all the moves you made. I think bringing you guys were describing it. I was like, yeah, no, the picture speaks for itself. I mean, you bring everybody all the way back for the circulation to get into it, so they kind of see the whole building and you bring them right back out to the street inside, and there's a porch. There's a porch overlooking the street, like all of the other houses with porches. Could you go back a couple slides to one of the front renderings? I do kind of wonder. I was looking at that opening that's on the right end of that porch, and I was looking at where the building sits, at least in Google Maps. And I do wonder if that still wants to be open. I feel like in this rendering, it looks one way, but I feel like when I'm looking at like the Google Maps, it's like visible from the like windows of that house next door, like kind of maybe overlooking them or looking right into them. And so I wonder a little bit about that if there isn't, a different kind of option there. Um,
Yeah, we could
but
explore. Yeah, we could explore what that would look like if we close it off. I understand that makes sense to me. You may not want to be have people sitting right there and feeling like they're in your front yard or something.
Yep, absolutely. But aside from that, I think this is it would be kind of wonderful for the neighborhood. Are the exterior, is that like a wood cladding or a metal cladding?
It's like a metal cladding right now, I think.
Existing cladding, yeah, it's a
Yeah.
really old painted metal, kind of stamped metal
Okay.
panel from what I can tell.
Yeah,
Are
that's
you
fine.
guys repurposing that, or are you getting rid of it and doing a different?
At the most, I would say we would get rid of it and replicate it in a sort of, red metal panel. But I'd have to turn to our construction team to figure out what they think is the most viable option there.
Okay.
If it's pretty rough, if there's a way to doll it up and restore it, that'd be great. But if you look at those existing conditions, it's in pretty rough shape. That being said, it's a cool material that is not tough for us to replicate with modern, panels.
Okay. Yeah, I mean it's whatever you want to do. Probably my committee members may feel differently, so I will pass.
Cool. Thank you.
Chris, do you want to take over?
Sure. Thanks, Nia. Yeah, I also think this is really beautifully done. I do want to state, I think the panels, if you can rehab them, would be fantastic. Whether it requires sandblasting or, doing what you can to save the ones that are there, I think would be great if you can salvage those ones instead of trying to replicate via a new panel. I did want to just bring up one item for consideration that I think would be great. And this also, is brought up with an assumption that the access to the left on this rendering, that's not vehicular, that's only pedestrian. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is,
Okay.
Dan, can you confirm that?
No, it's actually vehicular.
It is vehicular? Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because there's parking in the south part of the courtyard.
Okay.
And we need 2 points of ingress or egress?
What's that?
We need 2 points of ingress and egress off that site?
I'm not sure,
Okay.
but that was planned as access to the parking.
Okay. We can study and make sure that if we have those benches out there, that there is sufficient room
Yeah.
for vehicles.
Yeah. So just considering kind of just the way that those two things are going to interact, and then in the renderings, which I don't blame you for not showing it, I wouldn't show it at this stage either. It's just the way that your downspouts and your gutters are going to interact and come to grade. I think it's perfectly fine if that's just what you do, but I think there's an opportunity if you're actually occupying that drive aisle with pedestrians, with benches, if there's a way to, bring that down into a rain garden, or if you're able to just create some kind of meaningful experience and also use it as some kind of rain catchment with just kind of cost effective, rain gardens, bioswales, something, if you're able to harvest some of that width into using it, repurposing towards that, I think that would be really beautiful. Those are the only two really recommendations or thoughts I have for consideration. Otherwise, I think this is really well done.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, those we definitely looking at all those. Thank you.
Angela?
Sorry, can I let Whitney go first?
Of course.
Hi, Brad.
Hi.
Yeah, so I really appreciate some of the details with bringing the entrance over to the driveway. I think that's a really nice touch and brings the average pedestrian over away from the existing residential. I think some similar comments have been made, but I live between two commercial projects, and while it's
Mhm.
part of the neighborhood, I won't pretend that it doesn't impact daily life to some extent. Not so much that I think it needs to not exist. I agree that it should exist within the neighborhood. But I also saw the windows that were there, and I hate recommending to get rid of windows, but you have so much natural light, and I saw that there's maybe some additional windows that you're introducing as well. So I don't know if it would be possible to get rid of those that would, like, there was like a skylight, I think.
Yeah, so
Um,
I'd go back. I would go back to the interior, the original interior shots where you just were, if that's okay.
yeah.
So just to provide you the context, those windows are about 7 foot high, and are currently existing. Um, and if you look at the people on the right hand shot, they're at least, I mean, there's a 6'2" person there, so they're all above. They're all above his height. I don't believe we're proposing to add any additional windows.
Okay.
I think the windows add something to that space. I don't think they allow people, because of their height, to peer out at the neighbors. So I would respectfully push back on that a little bit, because I actually think they provide a lot of privacy for residents currently, and it is the existing condition. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They're
So
not massive, but I don't know if Mike has added any more windows than that.
I guess I saw maybe a skylight that I wasn't sure was existing,
Yeah.
but so it's just particularly, and if you go back here, right? And so I
Okay,
was
yeah.
curious if those are able to see inside of the home, because the home is very close, which I don't think you see in some of these photos. And
Yeah.
so, I just think if there's ways to minimize impact on such a close neighbor,
Mhm.
that's a really, let's do that as much as possible. So yeah, I don't, even if those are 7 foot high windows, I assume the home has a second story, so there still could be some privacy issues. But just, I don't know what that homeowner feels, so I'm
Right.
just kind of speaking as if I were them. Another question though, what are your plans for the back of the building? If there's going to be any more kind of like patio seating, or, are you going to change the use, or just sort of let it be the back?
I think we were just contemplating that it would stay as it is. Yeah, I don't think of any patio seating there.
Okay.
I think we provide. Yeah, and I'm not sure if that skylight is existing, but I think we can definitely live without that.
Well,
It's not. It's not. It was.
That's
I
it.
added it in kind of aspirationally, but it's a
Yeah,
fair comment. I think
yeah, it's a
we
good
are
point.
pretty close to that house. So
I mean, I like
People are
the skylight, and if you had to do something for the windows to ensure the neighbor's privacy, the skylight can add. I mean, you have a lot of natural light, which is lovely, but maybe the skylight can be instead of the windows to the. I think that's the south or the north. I'm sorry.
Yeah, even maybe some solar shades or privacy shades on those
Yeah.
windows. Something like that.
Yeah. So
Okay,
it's
cool. Yeah, we'll take that into account. But no, I don't think we're considering anything on the back. And if I look at the site plan, I don't know if there's even enough room for us to do anything
okay.
back there. And it's most likely where you'd probably end up putting a kitchen if it was some sort of use, because there's already a hood in place back there.
Nice.
So cool.
All right, that's all.
Yeah, thanks, Whit.
Back to you, Angelo.
Yeah, I can't remember who asked the great question about that access on the side there. A huge priority for me is ADA access. Obviously, like it's
Mhm.
important, it's required. And my recollection is that is kind of like a steep slope. So the fact that you mentioned that that's also vehicular access, and I think maybe it's like what, 10 to 12 feet wide. I'm just curious how you're going to make this building function for people who rely on wheelchairs. Do
Mhm.
you all have any concerns?
I did not until we had this conversation, which is the great part of having these conversations. That is something we need to study, and it's a great point, and we need to provide ADA access. And I'd like to take a look to see if go back in the records and see if we actually even need to have vehicular access there, or if I could just make it pedestrian. So I think Dan and I need to discuss that. And I'd like to come back to you guys with the solution for the next time, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm happy we're talking about it at conceptual. I think,
Yeah.
as my colleagues on this committee have mentioned, I think this is a great project, great work on this. The other question, and I think it's probably in a rendering of the front, I do see you rendering some people arriving to this space with bicycles. Have you considered or thought about how you're going to program for where people are going to lock up their bikes to keep that secure while they're visiting your space?
We've not gotten to that point yet, but I'm a big cyclist, so I would be happy to put in bike racks.
So, thank you guys.
Sure. Thank you.
I think I'm seeing more hands at the moment, but I'll give my thoughts. I mean, I echo my colleagues in that I think it's in terms of appropriateness, in terms of kind of activating this really underutilized and just, derelict building. Love. I think it checks all the boxes in that regard right now. I liked Chris's comment about if there's any way to salvage the existing panels, that could be really compelling. Even if it has a little patina and grit, I think that can work towards
That could be cool.
the aesthetic, yeah, in our neighborhood.
Mhm.
And perhaps not really in the direct purview of the Landmarks Commission, but I do think that this is one that you would want to get community buy-in. I am a person who understands the value of adding these little local businesses peppered throughout the neighborhood, but I think that there could be a constituent of immediate neighbors who are maybe not so thrilled about it. So I would love to see you guys kind of get ahead of that, especially with the change of use. I'm sure you've been in touch with OCI, but change of use, it can be a big one to kind of get support and get approval for. So as you know, I mean, I'm just probably preaching things that I know you've already thought of. And I agreed with Angelo that my first impulse looking at that was ADA accessibility in terms of the access ramp. Would love, love, love if that did not need to be vehicular access, both for the safety of your tenants, the users here, but also as cars are pulling in and out of that location, we know that visibility can be tight when we're in kind of like these alley-esque scenarios. The park is so prolifically used in this neighborhood. We would not want to compromise the very, very many people coming and going on foot to visit the park and hopefully, this business. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. And to address the neighborhood input, we are on the agenda for next Thursday with the block club. And then, so we'll definitely go through that. I've done that a bunch of times, not with this block club, but other ones. And then I agree. We'll have to take a look. I would love to just not have cars go down that path. I think it will lead to a better side. I think it will lead to a better public space. It's better planning. It's better development. So I will do my best for you guys to make that something cool. But we got to look at the reality too, and we might be required to have 2 points of egress. So Thank you.
Does anyone else have feedback that they'd like to give?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, all the design features of this are sort of hypothetical at this point still. I do think that the driveway is something that needs to be studied for its slope, to see if it's ADA accessible. It may be a little too steep. I think that in terms of vehicular access, the only real vehicles I think you would really want approaching the building would be for loading and unloading, supplies. So maybe a truck, there's enough room for a truck to back in just to get stuff kind of halfway up the driveway, and that's it. And maybe beyond that, there's no vehicular access. And then as far as egress goes, I think, that would be dependent on occupancy and use. So that's kind of the next step after zoning approval. We would come up with, a hypothetical tenant or an actual tenant and see what the occupancy looks like and what the ramifications of that are.
Right. Yeah, we just have to look how it relates for that drive as it relates to the multifamily project next to it. So that's good. And then from a process standpoint, we have the community block club, and then I believe we go to conceptual at landmarks as a whole, and then we come back to you for schematic. Is that correct?
Dan, are they on the landmarks agenda for next week for concept?
No, I don't think we are.
Oh.
Sorry. Yeah, we have you penciled in for the 5/23 meeting.
Oh, great.
For
Okay.
the commission for concept level or schematic level. After you get feedback from the commission, finalize your plans, come back to the committee. If you want to do community input in between there, that's up to you. I think it's a good recommendation, but not necessarily required by our process. Then you go back to the committee with final project, hopefully get final approval, then go to the commission, get final approval from them. So
Yeah, we'll come back with our schematics basically and ask for final.
Yes, we treat, I guess the planning commission has like concept, schematic, and final
Right. Okay.
approvals. We kind of use concept and schematic interchangeably.
Okay.
So this is kind of your schematic review. No vote is taken. It's just feedback from the committee. It sounds like everyone's supportive of it. A few questions that you guys sound like you want to look into anyways. So when you're ready for final approval, that's when we bring it back through.
Very good.
So
Okay. Perfect. So my feedback, I've got explore closing off south porch opening, try to rehab the panels, hopefully not replace, vehicular access versus pedestrian walkway, ADA with an exclamation mark, perhaps rain garden downspouts, skylight removal, and maybe look for some way to obscure those windows in some fashion, bike racks, basically. Cool.
sounds very close to what I wrote down to it.
Cool.
Okay,
If there's
great.
not anything else, thank you.
anyone-
Thank you, guys. Just awesome
Yeah.
feedback.
Brad, do you guys feel like you got enough feedback to keep moving?
I think so. Yep.
Okay, great. All right, well, if there are no further comments, then I think we're good here. Dan, do you want me to close the meeting?
Yeah, I don't have any reports unless you do.
No. So with that, today's May 16th meeting of the Historic Ohio City Design Review Committee, Advisory Committee, is now adjourned.
Cool. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Dan, do we have any business or anything like that?
No, nothing. Yeah, nothing else. Yeah,
Great.
so I guess we're adjourned. Thank you guys. Not
Thank
too
you,
long of
everybody.
one today.
No, it's good.
All right.
Thank
Bye.
you all. Bye.